Hello.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. What's going on?
Nothing much. I just wanted to come in and say hi. I've been a really long time fan, and you've really changed my views on a lot of things. So the R slur, and I used to be really into a lot of really alt-right stuff, and I kind of saved me from that.
Oh, cool. I appreciate that. That's cool, man. I really do. All right. Damn. I feel
And
you.
I wanted to ask what's your opinion on so with people like Daniel Larson and Chris Chan on the internet, do you think people with do you think there needs to be some more control on people with disabilities on the internet?
Um, Interesting question because I remember back in the day there was a thing where TikTok would try not to signal boost people with disabilities onto the app, and it got called ableist. And one reason could have been because they didn't want people to see somebody that was different in some capacity, and part of it might have been they didn't want to prevent bullying.
Hmm.
I think personally, we really shouldn't be not allowing people with disabilities on the internet in some capacity because that's a restriction of their human rights, right?
Yeah.
There's still people. There's still people. Obviously, we need to engage or interact a little bit differently with more understanding of whatever particular issue plagues them, or not plagues them, but impacts them. Just like we should with anybody else, but to actively restrict them, I think is the wrong thing to do. I think really the only thing we can do is have social conversations about how to treat people in general. It's really not any different than the way that you treat anybody. You look at a person, you might identify different things about them, and you might need to be a little bit more sensitive to a particular way that they interact, and you should just interact with them better.
Hmm.
So that's how I think we just need better social education. I know it can be hard for people like Christian, especially Christian, but even Daniel Larson, because they're not, well, I don't think Christian's a very good person, but they're not the best
Yeah.
people, we'll just say. But we also have to come to the understanding that the reason why other people are getting hurt is partially because people relentlessly trolling them. These are people who are a danger to themselves and other people. They should be
Hmm.
given more care, more like group home access, maybe have a couple of more restrictions, but that's a whole mental health evaluation. Like me personally, I think Daniel Larson should go into a group home and they should be
Yeah.
evaluated, and their potential behavioral specialists might need to put into a particular protocol, a behavioral protocol that doesn't allow them to have access to their phone, or at the very least TikTok, um you know because they
Hmm.
just can't do it responsibly. So that's what we really need to the way we need to interact with this stuff.
Yeah. I also had one more question.
Yeah.
Have you ever checked out the Daniel Larson wiki?
No, I have not. Somebody sent me a Daniel Larson video today to watch, and I was just like, I can't do Daniel Larson that much. It's just too much.
I think that might have been me. Was it on Instagram?
Oh, it might have been. It might have been. Somebody I think in the Discord sent something too. But I was
I
like,
think it's because you're mentioned in it a couple of times.
am I? Yeah, that makes sense.
You also have your own page on the Daniel Larson wiki.
Oh my God, do I really? Is it good
I
or
was
bad?
I was actually gonna read a little excerpt from it and see what you think about it.
Go ahead.
So this is what they have written. Many
Okay.
people claim he's uneducated when it comes to Daniel, and the community generally doesn't use Papa Guts videos as a reliable source of information. He seems to always take Daniel's side no matter how gruesome the situation is.
Okay.
So do you have any thoughts on that, or do you think this
Yeah,
is
I'm not surprised. The problem is that, and I hate to be super dismissive, but the problem is it's a lot of young people who don't have any real understanding of mental health issues. And
yeah.
again, I not to keep saying but my wife is a behavioral specialist. This is it's her literal professional job and career to deal with people like Daniel Larson on a daily basis. She has 20 or 30 people in her care overall across multiple houses, right? And so if it was a couple of years ago when I wasn't as educated on this topic, I would have been like, Daniel Larson's a horrible person, everything he did is wrong and it's all his fault. But now I'm older. I've had really robust conversations for years about these topics with my wife. She's been a little bit more involved in her opinion on some of these topics. And so I don't think it's much of a downplay. I don't downplay what happened. I think it's that people want to hear oh, Daniel Larson did all these bad things, which he did, but it's all his fault. I think that either these young people don't understand like how these different like things can impact them, or how somebody like Daniel Larson can be impacted by like social pressures in the way that he has been, or they just don't want to understand because they want to assign as much agency to him as possible so that they can call him a bad person. But the reality is, man, is this stuff's a lot more complicated than people think.
Mm-hmm.
I know people who have different disabilities like this, but in a way where most people don't, because again, I've met people in my wife's house and there's a different particular struggle, and I have more understanding and probably a little more empathy for what Daniel Larson's going through, even though he's not a good person, or I wouldn't call him a bad person. He's certainly flawed. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
But when 20-year-old Daniel Larson potentially, and we don't even know if what he's doing is like talking to like a kid or what he thinks is a kid. We don't even know if it's true because the trolls are so relentless. But it's not the same for a 20-year-old Daniel Larson who probably has the intellectual capacity of a 16-year-old as it would be for a 20-year-old in general. It's not the same. It's not okay, but I've consistently said it every time I talk about this, that Daniel Larson is a danger to himself and other people and needs to be taken off the street, and not really be allowed to be on TikTok. Frankly, in some capacity, he should have like some kind of restriction that doesn't allow him on TikTok from like a behavioral specialist. But people don't want to hear that. They want to hear what makes them feel comfortable. Like, yeah, this is a bad guy. It's like, yeah, it's a person engaging in a bad behavior. But again, this is somebody that interacts with the world very differently. And we should be understanding that well enough. You don't have to like the person, but to say that like, oh, I'm a bad, there's nothing that's been happening that's like magically going to change the context of what's happening with Daniel Larson. They say like, oh, I haven't checked in a while. I haven't, because when I do, that's what like the trolls want. They want people to give it attention and coverage. They want these big videos. But the reality is, I already know Daniel Larson. He's not a particularly complex person. He's a person with support needed, autism. I believe he's also schizophrenic. And a lot of what he's doing is through a filter of being trolled. And he actually thinks that he has managers that work for like Sony Entertainment. And shit like that. This is a person who's convinced to be homeless and go to California or whatever, and be homeless in California because he thinks he could be like a famous movie star. We're not talking about somebody of an equal age with like all that has everything there. We're talking about somebody that has like a significant mental issue, and I just have a better understanding than the 16-year-olds on the internet. And I'm sorry for talking so much, but I do have a lot to say about it.
You're good.
Additionally, when it comes to somebody like Daniel Larson, people are not used to people disagreeing with topics like this. Like, you're not going to hear a lot of people actively say, when it comes to a Daniel Larson topic or a Christian topic, that like, hey, listen, there's a pretty big level of responsibility on these trolls. Again, once Christian has gone to a point of no return, like they have to be punished in some capacity that keeps them off the streets. That needs to happen. But we should be looking at this as almost like a case study of how do we prevent this? Because I do think that with all these different people interacting with Christian, because if you look at it from their perspective, every single relationship they've ever built has been a lie, and they know that after it ends, and they get trolled and they get harassed, and now they have this weird fixation on the only person that's ever treated them like a human being, which is their mother, on top of trolls being like, oh my god, I think she wants to sleep with you, right? That Isabella Janky girl or whatever. And so like, we're talking about almost like fucking gaslighting. It's easy to gaslight somebody that has autism. Let's be real, easier. And we have to look at these things. But it's so, we're talking about somebody who raped their mom. And who's going to stand up and be and try to be like, hey, here's some nuance to the situation? Most people will just stay out of it because it's not worth the backlash. But for me, it's like, I think that these are the perfect places to start when it comes to conversations about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities existing on the internet. Because we talk about Daniel Larson and Christian, but we don't talk about people like Wiley Squared and other people with disabilities that are on like TikTok that just get bullied for virtue of their existence, but they haven't become these huge lol cow memes, right? So I'm just the only one talking about it because like it needs to be talked about, and most people are just afraid to even weigh in on this particular thing. And a lot of people just don't care about people with disabilities too. That's another factor.
I used to like think it was like people with like disabilities really only got like bullied on the internet because it's like a more like toxic place. But like I used to go to school with this one kid who was like autistic, and he was like high. Yeah, he was like high functioning, and people would like hype him up, and like they would like, you could tell like the way they were talking to him that they were like making fun of him, and it's weird. I think I don't know if this is like a thing, but I think a lot of people with like autism have like a weird fixation with like being on the internet, because they like convince the kid at the school to like make like he would like try to imitate Badland Chugs, if you know who that is, where he
No, I
like chug
don't.
like Sprite and stuff, and he would
Oh
like people
yeah,
would hype him
Badland
up in the
Chugs.
comments,
Yeah, I
and they
know who
got
it
the
is.
kid to like start making chugging videos and like mukbangs, and like it was like really disgusting and like
Yeah, and a
really
lot of it
cringe.
is to bully them, and additionally on the internet, something that people even without like a disability can struggle with is not understanding how to interpret like a like or a view. When you get like a like or a
Yeah,
view on the internet, it's just a like and a view, but it doesn't mean that you don't know why they liked it or viewed it. They might have viewed it because they thought that you were really awesome. They might also view it because they think that you're a joke and they think you're hysterical and they want to troll you. And I think that for a lot of people with disabilities on the internet too, they don't know how to distinguish the difference between those two things. It's just a recipe for disaster, and people just don't care. People don't really
yeah,
care for these people, and it's unfortunate. And I'm just trying to care a little bit where other people don't. When we have a word on the internet that's like as normalized as the R slur, and no other word is like nearly as normalized.
hmm
We have an internet culture that doesn't give a shit about people with disabilities. Like that's really what it comes down to.
yeah. Like that's why when I like started watching you, like I would I used the R slur like, and like you talking about like your wife and stuff, it kind of like made me realize like it's not like a really good thing to do, and it like made me really feel like I was like kind of a shitty person. And I'm glad I'm glad I like found your stuff and like I stopped using it, and I'm trying to like do better. I'm doing like a thesis paper on like how like the R slur is like really bad, and I'm trying to like figure out ways to like get people on my campus to stop using it and stuff like that. So
Yeah, it's because like I know that like at the end of the day, a lot of these are just words, and people think it's like super sensitive. But my thing is like I at the very least it shouldn't be used in public. It is a bigoted. If you need help with your papers, let me know. It is a bigoted slur. If you compare it to something like like the N word has been used obviously to dehumanize Black people and to put them into enslave them. The R slur used to be like a medical diagnosis that would make people institutionalized, and they would get systematically raped, tortured, and abused. And there are some people that my wife works
yeah,
with that used to be in those institutions, and then they engaged in deinstitutionalization and put them in. It's more person-centered. That's what it's about now. It's more person-centered. And so, it has been used to really dehumanize people historically. And now people will be like, well, it has two meanings. But you never say that about another slur, although the N word has like with an A, but you get my point. But that's just because
yeah,
society has allowed people to quote unquote change, have dual meanings, change the meaning, because there is no space for advocacy for people who are really offended by that word where they get a platform. The only thing I could think of is like looking at the Jubilee Down syndrome video. Like there's your perfect
yeah,
example. That's it. No other place, because people don't care. They think that because people can't necessarily, because it can be more difficult to communicate, especially when you're somebody that has like high support needed, autism or some kind of intellectual developmental disability. They think that because they don't exist, they don't care. And we have a normalization where like even in public, there are people, the group homes are on regular street blocks that my wife works at. And there are people on the block that just complain just because those people exist. They don't want people to build new group homes with people that have these disabilities because they think it lowers the property value of their homes down. They hate so many different aspects, even though they don't bother anybody, just because they exist close to them. Like the existence of a group home on your block communicates to somebody like, oh, lower property values. That's how much we disrespect people with disabilities in the real world.
yeah. That's crazy.
Even though, if you have a group home on your block's going to be the first block plowed because the town has to do that because, they have to get from point A to B. So if anything, you should be wanting to live on a block with people with group homes, okay? But yeah, it's very normalized, and we don't really talk about it too much.
Well, that was all I had. I just wanted to pop in and ask a couple questions. I love all your content, and you should make more Chris Chan reactions. I love those. So.
I know I got to catch up on my Chris Chan. I definitely do have to catch up on it, but it hasn't been something that I necessarily wanted to, so I haven't really, I haven't really looked into it too much. When I'm feeling it, I'll get back into it.
Yeah, whenever you feel like it, I'll watch whatever you put out.
Okay, well,
have a good one.
I appreciate that. Take care.
I want Papa Gut to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face. I want Papa Gut to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face.